Good afternoon, everyone. Good morning for those of you west of where I am here in Chicago. My name is John Bracken. On behalf of my friends and partners and my palace partners at Lyrasis and my friend John Wilkin, whom we're going to hear from shortly, it's my pleasure on the behalf of the Digital Public Library of America to welcome you to this important, timely discussion about the Palace Project. For those of you who don't know, DPLA's mission is about expanding access. And we're driven by the notion that it would be a tragedy in the digital world if people were to have less access to knowledge and information and not more than they did in the analog era. And this project that you're going to hear from Michelle and Micah and our friends is the output of active listening and work with so many of you over the years. And you'll hear more from the team, but I want to emphasize two things that we've heard that hopefully you'll see manifest in Palace. One is we heard a desire from libraries to have a single place to control their own digital content and present it to our patrons. Second, we've heard a desire consistently for flexible licensing with publishers. And what you're going to hear today from Micah and Michelle and our colleagues is that Palace is a practical, serviceable solution that we've stood up over the last year or so. And I want to give a special shout out to the main woman who has stood that up over the last year plus, Michelle Kimpton, my friend and former and future colleague and present colleague. The last thing I want to say is, when we talk about things like nonprofit missions and access, it can begin to feel really abstract. But I think as we reflect on the last few years, we know that the access to knowledge and information is not a drill. This is vital day-to-day needs. There are children, in our neighborhoods that we're close to who don't have access to the same digital content that other children do, and that is a crisis. I think there's lots of discussions that many of us have been involved with for years about the dissatisfied current state of how copyright handles digital content. There are questions about whether digital lending is the right model. And I want to emphasize that here at DPLA, we've made a bet that we need to build for today. We don't have the luxury to wait. We need to get content into people's hands. And the progress you're going to hear from these pioneers across the country, I think will help share that. With that, I want to hand it over to my friend and colleague and partner, John, who I get to see in person soon, but virtually. John, over to you. Thank you for being part of this project with us.
John Bracken, thank you. And I'm looking forward to seeing you on Saturday. So I'm John Wilkin. I'm the CEO of Lyrasis, and I've got to say, I am thrilled about Palace Project and what it represents for us, for Lyrasis, for the community. And I'm thrilled about the partnership with DPLA. This is a very powerful platform for us. You'll hear from folks, and as John alluded to, it really is about advancing equity. It's about making available the broadest, richest possible body of content, and that's what we're hard at work on. And I hope you appreciate that through the presentations today. And ultimately, it's about community engagement too. So making it possible for the community to take ownership and show ways that they can bring material together from their communities, but also with things like the curation core at DPLA to shape bodies of content. So let me just say again how excited I am by what we're doing here and what we're doing with DPLA, and emphasize as I conclude that really in the end it's about meeting you, our community, where you are, where your needs are. So I'm glad you're here, but we also want to hear from you and help shape what we do going forward. So again, John Bracken, thank you. Thank you for having me, and thank you all for joining us today.
Thank you, John. The last thing I'll say before I hand the mic to Michelle is I want to thank the folks who have made this possible. Sloan Foundation, Knight Foundation, IMLS, And all of you who participate in Palace are what makes what you're about to hear from Michelle and the team possible. So Michelle Kimpton, it's your rodeo.
All right. Thanks, John and John Double Johns. Before we get started, I asked Kat to just send out a little poll just so we have a good idea. We have quite a few folks that are participating, and we wanted to ask the question, is your library a current Palace user, adopter, customer? Check yes or not yet. And while that is happening, I will share my screen to get started. Okay, and I think the poll, I think the poll answers, darn it, sorry about that, pop up at some point. Okay, this is what I thought, half and half, roughly, 44% yes and 56% not yet. Okay, so we're going to cover quite a bit of material today because we have folks that are somewhat new to Palace and others that are in the process of adopting. So we'll try and make sure we have something for everybody in this next hour. We will be, as we're going through this, if you have questions that you want to ask, you can put them in the chat. I think that's where they would go, and then we'll answer them as we go along through the presentation. But if we don't have time, we'll try and hit as many of those questions at the end of the presentation. Okay. So just to give a little bit of history and timeline about how we began this work. It has actually been going on for quite a while, but I'm going to start with the collaboration between Lyrasis, DPLA, and New York Public Library came together in the spring of 2019 to collaborate on understanding the needs driving an expansion of Library Simplified, and also the launching of the first ever not-for-profit marketplace called DPLA Exchange. This work at DPLA and Lyrasis was supported by the Sloan Foundation. And from those efforts, where we really spent a lot of time talking to the community stakeholders that were interested in the project and their use cases, DPLA and Lyrasis received a grant in January 2021 from the Knight Foundation to really expand this work. The direction that we went was to really build a scalable platform and program that would really encompass all and any libraries that wanted to be adopters of Palace, whether you were a small rural library or a large urban library, and a state library. We had lots of demands and interest from state libraries that really wanted to use Palace to distribute their content to all libraries, all public libraries that were in the state, therefore increasing access and increasing equity to digital materials. In March of 2021, we came up with the new program name called the Palace Project. And in October 2021, we actually launched the Palace app in the Android and iOS app stores. During that time, DPLA was working hard on creating new lending models. Mike May will talk about that, but we did sign an agreement with Amazon Publishing and later Audible to make that content first available to libraries that were subscribing to using the Palace program, the Palace app. In December 2021, so roughly a year after the project got started, we were named one of the projects of the year by Library Journal. In May of 2022, our first 100 libraries were live with the Palace app with Overdrive content, in addition to Biblioteca, Baker and Taylor, and BiblioBoard. And in December of 2022, our first university came live on Palace, which is Columbia University. Today, we have 450 active libraries in the Palace app. Interesting, we have also one foundation, which is the Knight Foundation. They saw value in creating a library in Palace and sharing it with their advocates and their members and their constituents on ebooks and audiobooks that they felt of high interest to that community. We also have our first museum, which is Stonewall Museum and Archive in Florida. Again, they want to share content specific to their member interests, and that you can do on Palace. Our mission, and as John talked a little bit about this, we received the grant and the investment from Knight to really work with libraries to build a digital future for and with libraries. Libraries are very important pillars in their community. They have really become a space, a physical space for people to gather, no matter what your background, no matter what your demographic, no matter what your interests, with no judgment, and free access to all types of content, diversified content. So we want to support that in the digital space as well. In a time of the internet age, we feel that it is really important to increase access to content, e-content, and not decrease access. So we spend our efforts really building the digital space for libraries and working on increasing literacy and reducing the digital equity gap. Our values drive our decisions in terms of how we build out the platform, how we partner with our partners, and what partners we choose, and how we make decisions. So I'll just touch on this briefly. Patron privacy, protecting patron privacy is a big tenet of our values, and we make sure that we don't store any patron identifiers in our platform and in our system. We don't share any patron data with any third parties, and we make decisions based on the fact that we want to keep our patrons protected and don't collect any of that data. We are community driven. Lyrasis is a not-for-profit, DPLA is a not-for-profit, and of course the Palace Project is a not-for-profit. So we work with stakeholders in formalized settings as well as informal settings to gather feedback, to advocate for libraries, and to really move the field forward in having flexibility and choice and increased access in a digital age. We are proponents of open access. We have a whole offering called the Palace Bookshelf, which is part of the Palace Project. It is all openly accessible content that we source from a variety of publishers and aggregators. And in addition to that, our platform is open source. That means you can see it, get it, download it on GitHub, and potentially down the road, you might even be able to contribute to that open source code. And lastly, we're very interested, as I've mentioned, in equitable access, so that everybody has access to the app, that it is simple to use, that is available anybody that's interested, and the design of the app is simple, so it doesn't take a lot of effort to figure it out. There are 4 components of the Palace Project: the app, the manager, which are run and built by Lyrasis, then the Palace Marketplace, and the Palace Bookshelf. These are run and managed by DPLA. And of course, the whole project is a strategic collaboration between Lyrasis and DPLA. Lyrasis provides turnkey hosting, implementation, training, and support. So the libraries really have very little that they need to do in terms of, nothing they need to do in terms of technical infrastructure. We ensure all of your content providers are integrated into your Palace app and your Palace manager. We make sure it's connected via your ILS for your library cards. And then we do training and marketing to help you get familiar with the Palace project, the Palace app, and introduce it to your patrons. One thing I'll mention specifically for anybody that is a adopter of Palace, a library, we have the community hub, and this is a place where we post quite a bit of materials in terms of training materials, marketing materials, and also updates on technical updates, feature updates. And it's a place where you can also ask questions to us, but also ask questions to other Palace libraries. So if you're not a member of the community hub, it's a great place to get that information. And there will be links to find it at the end of this presentation. Some of the recent improvements, I'm going to give you a demonstration, quick demonstration of the app right after this. I know there's a lot on this page, so I apologize for that, but some of the recent improvements made in the app are PDF support. So beyond EPUBs, you can read, download PDFs, language localization in the app. So I think now have French, Italian, German, and we're adding other languages so that those screens are localized. There's support for screen readers, for visually impaired. The app plays for audio, plays via Bluetooth, CarPlay, and the Apple Watch. And we've spent a lot of time really enhancing audio listening and chapter support. Palace Manager, this is the back end of this is really the Palace administrative platform where libraries can see what content providers they are making available via the app, as well as data associated circulation. A lot of effort we've spent in the last months is really building a new advanced list feature that allows libraries to curate ebooks and audiobooks more easily so that they can really promote ebooks and audiobooks that, first of all, that they have, that don't have long holds queues, that are more customized to their community, and that they can change out quickly depending on what events and topics are really front and center in their community. Okay, down at the bottom here, this is a link to the Palace roadmap. It is available to the public, and so you can see what we're working on, and that's available for anybody. Okay, I am going to go to do a really quick demonstration. Let's see if this works. All right, let me get out of this. Here we go. Okay. Can everybody see that? Anybody see that? Somebody let me know.
Looks good.
Okay, thanks. Okay, so this is a screenshot, not a screenshot. This is the actual Palace app. So when a patron or anybody goes to the App Store and they search on the Palace project, they can download the app. And if they don't have a library card, the first thing they would do is they'd come to a screen. It would say, find your library, which then brings you here. And then the user can type in the library that they're looking for. If their library is not a member of Palace, they still have full access to the Palace bookshelf, which I talked about a little bit. The Palace bookshelf has over 10,000 openly available titles. That includes publications from DPLA, as well as key public domain books, as well as open textbooks, as well as university press open access books. So you can see a number of these titles. I won't go too much into this because I think Micah is also going to give a demonstration of this. But the also neat thing about the Palace Bookshelf is when you download the title and read the title, it's your book to keep. It doesn't have, it's not wrapped with any rights. They're fully available for you to keep, and they remain on your bookshelf under My Books. So that's a neat feature. So next, I'm going to go to Main Street Library. This library is actually our library with inside Lyrasis, and we use this to kind of show different features and functionality of the app. As I talked about just prior about the ability to build lists quite easily in an automated fashion, you can see that in this Main Street Library. So we have new and noteworthy. We basically sorted through titles that were just published. We have Indigenous authors. We have Celebrate National Science Fiction Day. And these lists were created by this very advanced search and faceted search functionality that we built in the Palace Manager. And we did this in collaboration with Ocean State Consortia, with Stephen, who's is on the panel today. And part of the driver was really shifting or helping libraries get a higher return on investment for the titles that they have, and being able to put new titles, diverse titles covering different topics in front of patrons and shift them away from just looking at bestsellers. And this is a really great way to do that. So if I look at the books that I have on my bookshelf, one of them is Lessons in Chemistry, and I am partway through the book, as you see. But some of the things in the toolbar I want to point out is some of the accessibility features. You can change the background to black background, which some people really like for reading. I personally like the paper white. You can increase the font size, increase the brightness, and then you can change the font. This is an open dyslexic font, and then you have other fonts as well. You can also navigate by chapter. So I'm in the 4th chapter now, but if I want to go back to the 2nd chapter, I can do that. If I want to bookmark something in this chapter, I can do that. Now the app will remember if I stop reading and I close the app, it will remember what position I'm at. But maybe for whatever reason, I want to remember this particular page, and I can do that through the bookmarking. So those are some highlights. I wanted to show at the same time what other libraries are doing, which are unique. Some are unique in Palace, but also give libraries, like we were talking about, flexibility and choice. So this is Avon Free Public Library there in Connecticut. And on this top lane, you see All Connecticut Reads 2023. And these are books that were procured by Connecticut State. The licensing was actually negotiated by DPLA through the Palace Marketplace to make sure that these were always available to all libraries that are using Palace. So the state has provided the ebooks, and Avon, as well as the other 186 libraries in Connecticut, can access those books. And the goal here is to make those books always available through the licensing models that were procured. Another, and I'll do one last because I'm running out of time. I'm going to show our academic library, and we have a couple of these now, but I've got Columbia University on the screen. These, they use Palace app to aggregate their ebooks that they're giving to their patrons, of course. And here you have the digital collections. These, I believe, are actually provided via their partnership with Internet Archive. So these are typically in PDF form. They are ebooks, or they're books that have been digitized, and those are available through the Palace app. In addition to that, they also have ebooks provided by ProQuest and Springer. And you can see in that case, this book is coming from ProQuest. I think this is ProQuest. I think there's a Springer book in here as well. But again, taking books from multiple content providers and making them available in a single place. And this was, as I said, our first academic library. And we're seeing, similarities in providing a single app that patrons can go to for all of the ebook, and in the case of public libraries, audiobook content, regardless of what vendor, therefore giving the library's choice. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing, and I am going to kick it over to Micah, who's going to talk to us more about Palace Marketplace and Palace Bookshelf.
Thank you, Michelle. Thanks for that overview. So I think we might be a little behind, so I'll try to go kind of quickly through this. We want to make sure we have lots of time for our panelists who are actually libraries using Palace to talk. So as Michelle said, I want to just give you a little bit more about the collections piece of this that I helped drive with DPLA as our contribution to the Palace project. And I guess at the risk of any redundancy before I do that, I just want to one more time thank the folks that have really made this possible financially. When we started looking at building these ebook systems when I was at NYPL back in 2010, realized that commercial platforms of this scale get tens of millions of dollars in investment, and then they often go belly up or get acquired or whatever. So we've had the equivalent of this startup philanthropic investment from really mostly three funders. Initially IMLS, who funded the Library Simplified and LEAP projects that this builds on, stands on the shoulders of. Sloan Foundation, who's been a constant supporter of this work, and really let enable DPLA to initially launch the DPLA exchange in 2017. And then most recently, and most significantly in terms of the amount of investment, the Knight Foundation, who has really allowed the Palace project to take off and, take this to the next level. And as someone who's been working on this, in its various iterations for over a decade, it's just really thrilling that we are by far kind of the biggest, fastest, strongest, best version of this that has ever existed. So thanks to Michelle and now John Wilkin for their leadership of this at Lyrasis. It's a really exciting part of our work. So on the screen is the Palace Marketplace. This is the nation's only nonprofit-driven distributor of ebooks for libraries. So we are a full-fledged distributor of ebooks and audiobooks. These are some of the curated lanes of recommendations, and we have lots of others. As part of this service, we can offer custom collection development support for libraries. So if your library is interested in sourcing books and would like help building carts, we can make some initial suggestions that you can review. Lots of our libraries have benefited from that and found that it makes the process of building their collections easier. And we do that on a custom basis, tailored to your collection development priorities. So, overall, the Palace Marketplace is really, we're really proud that it's really reached scale. We have over 1.4. I'm going to show you another section with another 200,000 titles. So over 1.4 million titles. We have all of the big five and lots of other publishers that are not otherwise available to libraries. So, as both John and Michelle mentioned, DPLA's mission and Palace's goal in this project is really to maximize access. And we do that by supporting libraries and helping them provide the broadest possible access to their patrons. So that manifests in a few ways. We do our best to try to create a really wide diversity of content here in terms of the types of titles that are available, types of publishers, et cetera. But we also recognize that in order for libraries to maximize access, they need reasonable licensing terms. And so we've worked with publishers to secure deals on multiple options that we know libraries have wanted, and the best possible terms we can. Now, at the end of the day, it's obviously up to the publisher what terms they're going to offer. So what we do is, advocate, cajole, and negotiate to try to get to better terms. And we've had a lot of success. And I would say that you all, as part of our community, are a big part of that success. Obviously, our ability to influence publishers is ultimately going to be driven by our market share. And if we can show publishers that libraries are motivated to acquire their titles if they offer something reasonable, then we're going to get even more traction on that. But already we have dozens of publishers that have been willing to offer multiple options, and we think, reasonable and attractive options. So at the risk of making you dizzy, I'm just going to scroll through some of these. These are all publishers that offer multiple licensing models through the Palace Marketplace. You'll see many of these are Amazon publisher imprints, and I'll zoom in on one of those in a second. We also, as Michelle, I think, mentioned, have the Audible titles. But all of these are publishers that we're excited to be able to bring, our recommended licensing types and a wide variety of licensing options. So, without making you totally busy, we're down in the L's, but I'll just show you one of those, which we're really excited about. Blackstone, obviously a huge audiobook publisher, and they have agreed to offer all three of our preferred licensing models. So these are the three models that we have heard a lot of libraries interested in and that we ask publishers to support. That's the unlimited, one at a time perpetual that will never disappear from your digital shelves. This model that we kind of minted of 40 loans, and you can use up to 10 of them simultaneously. So this is trying to strike that balance between the publisher's interest in making sure that after a significant amount of use, the book will eventually expire, but that libraries now can lend this to 10 people at a time. So they get a little more ROI out of it in terms of their collections impact. This was developed in collaboration with librarians who told us physical books typically circulated 40 to 50 times before they needed to be replaced. So we were able to use that to drive this deal with publishers. We also created this model of a small bundle of 5 loans. It's a higher price per loan, but it's a smaller overall price. We first started offering that when we began working with Independent Publishers Group, who is an aggregator of smaller independent publishers with over 100,000 titles. And we wanted libraries to be able to kind of take a chance on lesser known books without committing to an expensive license. And then, Blackstone opted to offer the 2-year license as well. So publishers can choose to add as many options for libraries as they wanted, which we've heard from libraries consistently is one of the ways we can help, is by giving them some choices in terms of what they acquire. Here's one of the Amazon imprints and the licensing terms that they're offering. They weren't comfortable offering the perpetual license, but they are offering the 40 by 10, the 5 by 5, the 2-year, and then the HarperCollins style 26 lens. So again, Audible is offering the same combination of licensing terms on all of their titles. So all of those titles are available with that variety of licensing terms. We're excited to be able to bring that flexibility as an option. And again, ultimately our success in this is going to depend on, libraries working with the Palace Project. I just wanted to mention with regard to Audible and Amazon, these are currently exclusively on Palace. As nonprofits who want to maximize access, we have not stipulated that in our contracts. We want these titles to be available as broadly as possible. So those organizations have opted to work just with us, at least for now. And we're excited to be able to bring that access to bear, but ultimately want, the broadest possible access across the library community. So I'm going to show you a little sneak preview of something that's going to launch to the public in February, which is our new indie catalog. So these are self-published titles that we're going to make available to libraries. We already have about 200,000, and over the course of the year, as we add additional sources, we expect this to grow to over 1 million titles this year. So within the catalog, it can be found here as the indie catalog. So in addition to bringing these to the market, we plan to create selections curated by the DPLA Curation Corps, who are all librarians that work with us to help make these recommendations. So we know that there's a lot of opportunity to create access around independently published works and self-published works, but the libraries are going to need some help finding, the diamonds in the rough, finding the titles that they really want to add to their catalog. So we're going to be creating selections of recommended titles the libraries can feel confident sourcing, in many cases, very attractive terms. One note about the DPLA Curation Corps, that is who drives all of our selection recommendations and the curation that I mentioned in terms of custom collection development support. Those are all librarians who work with us on the side and receive a stipend. It's a really, powerful group, centuries of library experience collectively. And we're happy that we can bring that to bear and that you can leverage it. There's actually an open call available right now. So we're looking for some more librarians to join that core as the work continues to expand. So that Curation Corps both creates recommendations for libraries building collections in the Palace Marketplace. They are beginning to create these selections of independently published, self-published works. And their core work has been in curating the Palace bookshelf. So the Palace bookshelf now has actually over 16,000 titles on it. Every single title has been individually reviewed by a librarian. They make sure that the metadata is accurate. They often generate new jacket covers if there isn't a good one. And they make sure that the underlying file and the quality of the content is at a level that libraries would be happy to add it to their collections. So this is available to all the public on this website, in the Palace app, under the Palace bookshelf. And for Palace libraries, you can automatically integrate all this content into your own collection so that it's not found in a separate place. It's merged with your purchased titles, which is really powerful. So a couple of examples of what you'll find there. There are DPLA publications, books that we have published. Most of these are derived from government documents. So for example, we just released our second version of the January 6th on the record, which is the only freely available EPUB version of the January 6th hearings. It's complete with, hundreds of annotations and links, and basically a digital finding aid to permanently archived resources related to those hearings. Lots of other similar DPLA publications that we think are really important for libraries to make available in their collections. And it also includes works that libraries have brought to us. So this is one of my favorites. This is a book that we worked with some of the Maryland libraries, St. Mary's, to create. These were books that they own the copyright to and had clearance to use. And so we were able to create a high quality EPUB of this book. And it is available to anyone using the Palace bookshelf. This particular book is about the desegregation of Maryland schools. And because of the list and lane curation opportunities Michelle described, Maryland was able to put this and other local interest books right at the top of their discovery experience and drive a lot of attention and use to it. So that wasn't quite as quick as I'd hoped, but I'm going to go ahead and wrap on that and pass the baton, I think, to our panel. So I think that's Mike is going to be chairing the panel after Miguel and Steve each give a short description of how their library is using Palace.
Thanks, Micah and Michelle. Welcome, everybody. We have the good fortune today to be joined by two distinguished library leaders who will discuss how and why they are using the Palace project. First up, Miguel Acosta, the San Diego County Library. Miguel has been serving as the director of the San Diego County Libraries since September 2016. Prior to coming to San Diego, Miguel served as Assistant Director and Chief Information Officer of the County of Los Angeles Library, and also worked for the Santa Monica Library and the RAND Corporation before that. Take it away, Miguel.
Thank you so much, Mike, for the warm introduction, and hello to all our attendees. Thank you for joining us for this important discussion. Before I talk about the San Diego County Library experience, I want to give some background on California and what's going on out here, because we enjoy tremendous support that gives us an extra boost when we decide to get started with the Palace project. It's been less than a year since the California State Library has announced a program called eBooks for All. And eBooks for All is a partnership between the State Library, Lyrasis, DPLA, and also the Black Gold Library Cooperative. And what that's done for us is the State Library has essentially funded initial onboarding and hosting costs for public libraries in California that want to join this cooperative. So, of course, we were one of the first to sign up. The latest statistics is that there are 50 participating library jurisdictions in California, covering more than 9 million California library customers with 87,000 items in the collection. And in addition, the State Library also funded an initial collection to be shared across the state of California. The newest development is that the State Library offered a matching grant for ebook licensing. So for individual libraries to purchase licensing content with a match from the State Library. When I use that term match, it's quite a generous match, with the jurisdiction doing about between 20-25% of the cost and the state doing the rest. And I'll return to that a little bit later. So that's the background under which we're working. So again, we enjoy that support. If your state doesn't have that, I believe this is the easiest on-ramp to providing ebooks, and I'll talk about that as well. So let's now go to the San Diego County Library experience and why we are participating. So we have been innovatively building our ebook service aggressively since about 2016. And our business partner is Overdrive. So we're an Overdrive customer, and we offer Libby to our customers. We've had great response from our customers, and we're now the second largest provider of downloads via Libby in the state of California. So we've passed 4 million downloads last year. Now, my interest is couple elements. The first, and I don't want to understate this, the first is I saw this as an opportunity to have a statewide partnership specifically with Lyrasis and DPLA, because when I talk to my West Coast colleagues, I don't feel there was as much awareness around these organizations as there ought to be, and I wanted to help foster that partnership and bring that partnership to other libraries in California. And then the second is I've described both as nonprofit commercial enterprises, and that's hugely important. Let me say why. So first, nonprofit, meaning there's no shareholders that these organizations have to return value to. Everything they do on behalf of members and partners. Commercial, because that means they have revenue and capital, because let me tell you, you all know software development's extremely expensive. So we want these innovations to continue. We have to, we have to pay software developers and so forth. It takes investment. So that's why I really, wanted that business relationship with them. Thought that was hugely important. The second thing is all throughout my career and in discussion with colleagues and everywhere I've worked, we've always been really hesitant to add a second provider for our ebooks. We always felt, maybe you feel the same, that's going to confuse the customers, right? So you have whoever your commercial vendor is, and like, do I do two? How do I switch? All that thing that we're worried about, confusing the customer experience and the branding experience. I believe, and not just because I want to believe it, but we have some data to show that our customers are really clear about our brand, that our brand, any product we offer is like a sub-brand to the San Diego County Library brand. And if we have time during Q&A, I could share a little bit more about that. So with that knowledge, it was like, no, we have very sophisticated users. Let's see what we can do with a couple products. So that's part one. And then part two is the content that's available in the Palace project is, in my mind, very unique and very well suited to a lot of our customers. So one of the things I was going to say is our ability to publish local content. I did not know about Micah's presentation. So that indie thing, that's exactly the kind of thing, right? So as a county, we do a wonderful agricultural report, for instance, from one of our other departments. We'd love to publish that data because we believe there's national worldwide interest actually in some of that. Same with sustainability programs and things like that. So one, to be a local publisher. Second is competition is good. We like to see a thriving marketplace of ebook providers and access. And so that's another reason. And then we think we have some specific audiences that would benefit from Palace content. We have a huge community of unaffiliated scholars here in San Diego County. Of course, our K through 12 and college students. And then finally, we just have many, many voracious readers. And we can't, they probably have more needs than we can meet just through the commercial platform. So those are the reasons that we are personally interested. Now, I do want to say, okay, I've been on other webinars in the state of California. And the other thing I want to acknowledge is that we're well funded and we can buy this commercial content. I've talked to my colleagues. If your jurisdiction has no ebook provider or you don't have an ebook collection, Palace Project, I absolutely recommend it. It's the way to go. It is the lowest cost entry. As Micah pointed out, you already get a very robust collection that's available to you before you license any content. And then the benefits of having a robust digital library are quite dramatic. And maybe if we have time later, just your reputation of your library jurisdiction, I believe will be greatly enhanced by providing this. So, so those are the two main reasons. I'm coming to the end of my time. I do want to say that this fiscal year we'll be investing $60,000 in licensed content, and a huge bulk of that again is from the state library grant. But the investment is also in time of our collection development staff who are participating at the California level of curation, our marketing staff. So we are in this for the long term strategically, like we're 5-10 years, if that's what it takes to get major results comparable to our commercial provider, that's totally fine with me. We're looking at the long haul. And then let me mention, we're only at the cusp of getting started. We are in the process of getting CRM, customer relationship management, or online email marketing. We don't even have that product. So the first thing we would do is upsell our current customers to the Palace Project. We haven't even done that yet. So we're really, really at the beginning stages, in my opinion, of where this can go and how much we can build the Palace Project in the communities that we serve. So I will end there and go back to Mike for our next speaker. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Miguel. That was great. All right, our next speaker is Steve Spahn. Steve is the Executive Director at Ocean State Libraries, the statewide public library consortium in Rhode Island. Prior to that, he worked at the Massachusetts Library System, where he launched a statewide ebook program, and at Nelanet and Lyrasis as a consultant for planning and assessment. Steve was also active in forming what is now the Core Ebook Interest Group. Take it away, Steve.
Great. Thanks, Mike. And thank you, everybody. It's always an honor and a surprise to be invited to speak at these things. I'm never quite sure that I've got enough to say or contribute, but I also have the honor of going last, which means I've got to giddy up here in terms of leaving some time for questions. So thankfully, I prepared some slides in advance to help me stay on time here. So first off, just a little bit about us. We are a statewide public library consortium in Rhode Island. Among our shared services to our member libraries is a very mature ebook program that's until now been pretty much overdrive. We just hit 1 million circs last year, which was a big deal for us in Rhode Island. We're a small state. Why are we interested in Palace, and frankly, any way to be disruptive in this ebook industry? Well, rising costs, increasingly unfriendly licensing, increasing complexity. We've got members using Hoopla and Biblioteca and Access 360 and all sorts of different products. And we just want to do better for everybody. Obviously, what Palace can do is it provides the promise of a future where there's a single platform to access everything. Somebody asked the question about what it can do today, and I did answer that in the Q&A panel you can see there. But I hope you do take seriously my comment there that they are actively talking to other content providers. I'm sure Michelle or somebody else and from the Palace Project can address that during the Q&A. And flexibility to purchase from whom we want. One of the big things right now for us, Palace is a pilot project. And we are not interested in duplicating the incredibly intensive management that we are doing to maintain our ebook platform. And if you're interested in all of that, my counterpart, Lisa Salee, who is assistant director and really handles the day-to-day of our ebook program, specifically Overdrive. She's doing the speaking circuit lately, and you can hear about all the amazing things that she does to control costs, increase usage, and balance all of that. But a little bit about our journey. Again, we've got a shared Overdrive collection, a few Overdrive Advantage customers. We're all in on Advantage Plus, and a few other odds and ends. Pandemic hit, usage exploded. I'm sure, the same thing happened for many of you. Immediately, we invested heavily, and I mean orders of magnitude heavily in curation and Overdrive, creating fresh swim lanes that were being recycled every day, every other day. We were making sure that there was a fresh, available now content in front of users. Pressing our members for increased spending, increased funds from them to spend on the collection. And we did reduce the maximum number of holds that patrons could do in the system. And over that, we managed to maintain, even reduce our average wait time, which is kind of where I wanted to get to. It's all about curation for us. And that's kind of where we ran into a problem with Simply E and how we got started with the Palace project. So Simply E back in March of 2020, when we were trying to, really June of 2020, when we were trying to get it off the ground, didn't quite have all the bells and whistles on the back end for building curations or curating what Palace calls lists and lanes in the collection manager. And when Lyrasis reached out to us about the Palace project, we basically said that we're dead in the water without this development, and they agreed to develop that functionality for us and for everyone so that we could kick that off. And I was reminded by my colleague, Miguel, none of this could have been possible without generous ARPA funding that flowed through our state library agency, the Rhode Island Office of Library and Information Services, who funded this whole project in its first year, and will likely help us pay for the second year as well. We are very happy to say that that effort paid off. We purchased a good deal of content, not an insane amount of content, but a goodly investment of content from DPLA's Palace Marketplace. In addition to our Overdrive content, the free open access Palace bookshelf, and some other odds and ends we had lying around, we brought into the Palace app launching in September. Where we are now is really looking more at fully using the curation that they've built out for us and marketing. What are we going to do in there? And again, I would say my takeaways are the investment in the curation, which I'll share a little screenshot for you. The thinking through the launch, which, you know, not many libraries or library organizations have a strong marketing team. I know Lyrasis is standing by to help us out there, and we're looking forward to working with them. But let's talk about the curation piece. And now I've got to move this bar out of the way. There we go. So in the collection manager that you'll see, there's what Michelle referred to earlier as lists and lanes. So there are lists of books, and the challenge that we faced in here was that all of the lists were done, essentially, they were either out of the box lists or they were done by cherry picking titles one at a time. The challenge for us, twofold. One, picking books one at a time is a whole lot. And it's how we're doing it in Overdrive already. And I already said we're not trying to replicate what is already a very intensive activity. The other piece is we have 50 members. So whatever we did in one, we would have to replicate 50 times for every single library. And that's why we kind of fizzled out back in 2020. And so after a lot of conversation with our friends at Lyrasis and the Palace Project collaboration, they built this, which I think is lovely. And it allows us to use the metadata that's built into the different streams from the different content providers that we have, where I can, you know, for example, say, you know, does this subject contain true crime? And it adds subject to crime, or I can add a different publisher or different audiences, or et cetera, et cetera. So we're able to use advanced Boolean operators now to create these queries that essentially translate into automated swim lanes for inclusion here. And they also built out a way for us to have all of these to push all of these lanes out to all of our users. So I still overtalked, and I'm running up against the end here. So I'm going to shush myself, and even though that's a horrible stereotype, and turn the mic back to my friends, and hopefully there's time for questions. So thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Steve. And we got about a minute or two left. I'm going to send it back to Michelle right now. Thanks, everybody.
Sure. And yeah, sorry we didn't leave more time for questions, but hopefully you found a lot of the content that was presented today super interesting. I did leave 2 questions here. I'll go with one here. Is Palace geared more for public libraries? I am an academic librarian interested in learning more. Yes, we are currently under, I'd say beta with academic libraries, defining what the use cases and the content providers and the special features and functionality. We do have 3 academic libraries. I demoed one, Columbia University, NYU, and the California Digital Library System that has been using and testing Palace. We'd love to find out more from you if you're interested. Last question, are the items patrons download in other e-resource apps supposed to show up in the Palace app? Yes, we are not integrated with Hoopla, but we are integrated with Overdrive, Biblioteca, Baker and Taylor, Palace Marketplace, BiblioBoard. When you implement Palace for your library, you work with the implementation team to provide your content credentials. Once we have those authenticated, then content that you have purchased from those vendors flows into your Palace Manager and your Palace app. So hopefully that answers at least those questions. We answered many more asynchronously. Thank you all for attending today. I want to give a big shout out to Miguel and Mike and Stephen for sharing what they're doing at their libraries and in their states. And I wish we had more time to speak to all of you individually. If you have more questions, please email us at info@thepalaceproject.org. And once again, thanks to our funders, I am Les, Sloan, and the Knight Foundation for making this project possible. Have a great day.